Welcome, Olivier.
Thank you, Philip.
So you joined Airbnb in 2012. You must be like a veteran there.
Yeah, it seems like ages ago. I think there were like maybe 100 employees at the time, and we have like
100 employees. And when did Brian start Airbnb?
2007, 2008.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, a few years.
So there were 70 employees when you started?
Around 100. I can't
100.
remember exactly. Yeah, but.
And how many employees now?
I think we are a little bit above 1,500. So,
1,500.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good. A lot of people don't know the origin of the name Airbnb, so maybe you could tell them that story quickly.
Yeah, so a lot of people ask us, how did you come up with this name? Because it's a little bit unusual, so I'm going to give you the story pretty quickly. But when Brian and Joe and Nate founded the company, basically they did like a lot of our hosts are doing today, which is they had to make ends meet. They needed a little bit of money, and they happened to have a spare room in their apartment. So they said, what can we do with that? There was a conference like this one happening in San Francisco that were a couple of weeks later, and they decided to, create a bed and breakfast. The only issue they had is they had a room, but they didn't have beds. They had hair beds, so they inflated them, they put it in a room, and they said, well, we're going to call our bed and breakfast an air bed and breakfast, and that was the name they came up with, and they shortened it at some point to Airbnb, so that's the story.
That's good, because a lot of people think the air is from airline or air ticket.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of hot air in there.
Yeah, people ask me, like, is it an airline? Is it like a music band? I have heard a lot of different things, a ventilation system or different things, so yeah.
I was at a dinner here last year at ITB, speaking to a person who had a newsletter in hospitality, and I guess I've always been the one that introduces these things first to a lot of people. And she said, I've been in hospitality for over 25 years. Airbnb is not a proper hospitality company. So you can imagine what I said, but what do you say when you get these kinds of comments? Or
I think we're part of the ecosystem now. People can argue we are like a tech company or a hospitality company or something else. I think we strongly believe that we are a hospitality company, and our hosts are as well. They are the one providing the hospitality to the guests. They are welcoming, more than 30 million people so far. So, if you look at the scale, I think we can say we are. And the way the experience we deliver to their guests, you can argue, people are pretty happy with the hospitality we get.
Because it's interesting. I think before Airbnb, Intercontinental Hotel Group had the most rooms of any hospitality company in the world, around, I want to say, 700,000. Mm-hmm. And I believe Airbnb has just blown through 1 million, right? And then some people say, well, they're not available all year round. Some are summer, some are winter. But eventually, even adjusted for seasonality, it'll have the most hotel rooms. What's that like to have a brand, and you wake up in the morning, and you can have more people sleep in beds that you've helped sell than any other company in history?
I think for me personally and for the employees, it's pretty rewarding to know that a few 100,000 people are sleeping every night in an Airbnb listing, and that we help people travel that potentially otherwise would have not traveled. I was talking to somebody right before about the fact that a lot of families, for instance, do travel to big capitals of the world through Airbnb, and they would have not done it for many of them otherwise. Like when you travel with 2 or 3 kids, it's actually very convenient to have an apartment with several rooms, to be able to take a few meals in the apartment. So we're actually creating a new category for families. Sure. Is just an example.
When you joined 3 years ago, did you really think it would get this big, this fast?
We have a pretty inspirational leader, and our founders are pretty inspirational. So Brian in particular, so he could sell you anything. So when I interviewed and he told me this thing is going to be huge, I kind of believed him. I did.
Yeah. Did you guys have budgets for 3-year horizons back then?
No, and we still don't have any. But we're still operating as a startup.
I just had this argument yesterday as the company said, no, we have to have a 3-year plan. I said, well, A lot of successful companies don't do that anymore.
Actually, funnily enough, like the day I accepted my offer at Airbnb back in 2012, the next day I had a laptop delivered to me, and I was asked to do my 2012 budget for the following night. Obviously, I didn't know anything. I did a budget that we never used, and that was the way a little bit we did budget at the time. So
it's good you say that, because a lot of people don't believe me when I say not all companies do it that way. I want to poll the company. I will just clap. So I'm going to ask a question. Don't do anything yet. The question is, do you believe Airbnb is a proper hospitality company? So if you think that statement is true, please clap now. If you don't think that statement is true, go ahead and clap now. So I'm a career researcher. That was 71.6% said yes. So
pretty accurate.
I would say to that, congratulations, because I guarantee you, if I asked this question on this stage last year, it would have been more than reversed. I think the only countries you don't do business in, seriously, is North Korea.
Yeah. We have North Korea, Cuba, Syria, a few Iran, a few countries, but we'll get there at some point.
How do a lot of companies want to grow by international expansion. What are, it's great to have an amazing product. It's the most important thing. But what are some of the physical realities? How many countries are you responsible for?
I'm responsible for the EMEA region, so quite a few, and we have 8 offices in Europe.
And so you've opened up many new markets since you've been. What's that like at a top level? How do you open up a new market?
Yeah, and I think going back to your question earlier, that's the difference between being a tech company and a hospitality company. If you're a tech company, you can run everything from San Francisco. You just have a product, you make it better, and you have a bunch of engineers actually working on the product.
Yeah.
As soon as you want to be, and you think you are a hospitality company, you need to be closer to your market. And that's what we realized in 2011, and when we opened most of the offices in 2012, that we needed to be closer to our community, guests and hosts. Now Europe is actually more than 50% of Airbnb's business, and it's mostly due to the fact that we were on the ground, we met our hosts, we understood what they needed, what they wanted, and there was a way to build the company together with them with what they needed. So that's the reason why we opened these offices back in 2012, and that's the main thing we're still doing at this stage.
And then there's this big gorilla sitting in the room. You see him, he's huge, sitting over there, called policy and regulations. Some of them are due to local hospitality taxes, other have to do with duration of stay, short versus long.
Yeah.
Even other ones have to do with people that have an apartment in their lease are not permitted to sublet it, and go just mind-boggling. So how would you summarize the situation, if that's possible, today?
To them?
To the audience. What's the, because the media is very sensational in these articles, they don't really give overviews. They'll talk about something that happened in Paris or something that happened in Istanbul. But if this is an industry show, so what's the current state of the policy issues vis-a-vis Airbnb?
So we have discussions with a lot of different governments at the national level, at the city level, and versus what you can see potentially in the press, these in most cases are going actually very well. Like what we do is actually going to the different authorities, introducing ourselves, explaining our model. The main issue that we're facing is people very often don't understand our model. When somebody from the Paris City Hall like 3 years ago told me your biggest enemy is ignorance, and he was pretty right. Like very often when people don't understand what they do, they have issues with it. As soon as they do understand it, most of the time we find a way to actually solve things out.
What's an example of a situation you had with a regulator and they didn't understand, and what did you explain to them, and that changed the outcome?
Yeah, one of the main misconceptions in the fact that you have apartments that are dedicated to short-term rental, used all the time for this. So we actually published a lot of studies in different countries just to say, no, that's not our model. Our main model is you host people in your primary residence, whether when you are here in a private room or when you go on vacation for a couple of days or a few weeks. And if you look at the different countries, between 80 and 90% of our supply is actually people who host in their primary residence.
Yeah.
And as soon as you demonstrate that, most people don't have any issue with that, because nobody can argue against the fact that it's good for everyone to enable somebody to rent their primary residence when they are not there. A lot of big cities especially have record occupancy rates. When you have a conference or a specific event, everything is solely booked. So everybody has to win. The host is winning because he's making a little bit of money when he's not there. The guest is getting an accommodation that he would have not had otherwise. And normally the taxpayers should win as well, and the economy wins as well.
I suppose you could make a very green argument too, by not having to build for just an infrequent peak capacity.
Yeah. The Olympics in the World Cup in Rio was a good example. You're not going to build hotels for a peak that lasts a month. Same thing, you have a lot of places where you have a very high seasonality. You don't want to build hotels for the peak or accommodation for the peak. Yeah. What we provide is actually be able to absorb some of that peak of frequentation, which, again, everybody has to win.
It also affects business. A good friend of mine has been a professional meeting planner for 30 years, and he's gotten very good every time there's a trade show or a conference to do his room block.
Yeah.
He's not so good at that anymore. It took him a while, but the percentage of attendees and delegates not in the room block has gone enormously high. What have you learned about the business traveler and Airbnb?
So there are obviously different types of business travelers. You have the people coming to conferences and convention. One example I use quite often is in Paris during the Paris Motor Show in June. The occupancy rate last year was 99.2%, which is all of you guys, nobody, it doesn't really exist in practice. So basically at that time, a conference organizer loved to work with us because it's a way to actually make sure that they can have a guest to their conferences. Yeah. So that's one piece of the business travel. The other piece obviously is you have people traveling for work. Honestly, when some people come and travel for one day and they need a very easy accommodation, check-in at any time, room service, laundry, whatever, hotel is the best way to go. There is nothing we can do to compete with that, and we're not trying to be honest. As soon as you stay for longer periods, some people like to actually stay in apartments, or if you travel with a group of colleagues, a lot of people like to actually share an apartment just to bond with each other. So there are a lot of use cases where, even for business travel, Airbnb can make sense.
How important is Airbnb's success connected with what I call timing? Because didn't we need companies like eBay and PayPal and Amazon to do some heavy lifting, and then of course Google and Apple putting your booking machine in everybody's hands? So how important is timing? A lot of people struggle with their startups. What do you think?
Yeah, I think timing is pretty important. There have been a few things that happened before Airbnb was created that, in my mind, explain the success of the past few years. One was technology. You said it. Right now, through technology, through payments, you can actually book an apartment as easily in Stuttgart when you are from Berlin as in Thailand. You pay in your own currency, you see the same listings, everything is as easy. So technology helped a lot with that. Mobile obviously is pretty key as well. A lot of our hosts manage their listing on mobile exclusively through their app. So the technology piece is pretty important. Very often I'm asked, is it just something of the economic crisis, to the question earlier, and then as soon as the economy recovers, Airbnb is going to crash. I obviously don't think so, otherwise I would not be there, but I think the economic crisis helped actually, because a lot of people needed a little bit of more money, especially on the host side. So it was a catalyst to the growth of Airbnb.
Yeah, the events of 9/11, 2001 in the United States grew the OTA business extraordinarily, so it's interesting.
And there are a lot of different things as well, like the fact that people want to travel a little bit differently. People very often, when they visit Berlin, for instance, they might visit, they come from far away, they might visit Berlin through a certain lens, going in very touristic areas the first time, and then as soon as they come back, they want to experience the city in a different way.
Neighborhood,
different neighborhoods, different, talking to people, being embedded in the culture, and obviously Airbnb is pretty good.
That's what I did this year. We have a 2-bedroom apartment. And,
on Airbnb, I hope.
Well, it was a home away, but I tried with Airbnb.
Okay.
Next week will be Airbnb, it's true. But to your point is, I woke up this morning to walk to the S-Bahn, 15 minutes, and I met the guy walking the dog, like the second time, so he we think we live here. It's very, very different like that. Another timing-related question, another amazing company, Pierre is going to be on stage after you. I've often wondered, do you think Airbnb and Uber kind of like helped each other, almost a 1 + 1 = 3 situation? Do you think Airbnb would have been as big as it is today, maybe without Uber, or do you think Uber would have been? It seems both of these simultaneous pioneering travel companies has had a exponential effect on customer behavior.
Yeah, you should ask the question to Pierre afterwards.
I'll ask him if he gives you guys any credit. But do you give Uber any credit in just growing this kind of marketplace?
So I think we learn a lot from each other on the technological side. For instance, the way they develop their app obviously is pretty world class. So we learn from that obviously pretty much. The fact that we are moving a little bit the lines in our own industry as well. There's something that we discussed obviously with Uber. But fundamentally we are on 2 different businesses, right? Like we are on the hospitality business, they're on the transportation business, so there's not that much links necessarily to our business more than what we see when we're in the same umbrella of the sharing economy.
Do we have anyone in the audience that's an Airbnb host in their spare time? Would you admit it if you were there? There's one. Okay, great. 2. You recently hired a guy I know, Chip Conley. I forget his exact title, but some senior VP in hospitality.
Yeah, his real title is Hospitality Guru.
He comes from a proper hospitality company, right? Share with the audience, what's the thinking behind hiring Chip, and what's he doing to further help grow the business?
So Chip has been in the hospitality business all his life. He started a boutique hotel chain a long time ago, like 30 years ago, in San Francisco, in California, and he sold it when he had like 55 hotels. And one of the reasons why we hired Chip was to bring some of that knowledge as well, because there are a lot of things that we need to learn from the traditional hospitality industry. And for instance, one of the things he did was to put some standards, so a set of standards for the host on what is it to be a good host. So there are like 9 standards from, you need to have
vacuum
give
cleaner?
Guidance. Yeah, stuff like that. And then one that he calls the 10th one, that he calls the secret sauce, which is basically, what makes Airbnb special, the fact that there is a human on the other side that's going to provide you some very tailored tips or that you will learn from. So that's definitely something that is done. Another thing is, sorry.
How do you enforce those standards? So give me an example of a standard has been it's a good one, but it's challenging to get it to permeate the entire host network around the world.
Well, you mentioned cleanliness is one of them, right? So we want every apartment when somebody arrives to be clean. So there are a few ways to enforce that. One is, as a guest, if you were staying on Airbnb during this conference, you would know that. But basically, at the end, you would actually rate the...
I've stayed at many Airbnbs.
I'm teasing you.
In fact, I once got my wife was with me. The guy said, "This is the best guest we ever had."
That's
Yeah,
pretty.
so yeah.
You're good guests.
But so how does that relate to actually raising the standards?
So basically, as a guest, at the end, you provide a score to the specific listing and on the hosts, on the communication, the price, and one of them is actually cleanliness. And obviously, that's one of the standards that we look at pretty clearly. And when your score is not as good as it should be, we provide you extra education. And if it doesn't improve, that's one of the automatic filters that we have that would kick you out actually of the platform.
Yeah. I'd like to wrap up with a question looking forward. Amazon started with books. I'm going to ask Uber a similar kind of question. But there's lots of expensive physical assets in the world that are underutilized. So it makes me wonder, what else does Airbnb think about in the future to help connect buyers and sellers beyond beds and rooms and apartments?
So we started the business with connecting travelers with hosts. Obviously, we could have we could develop the business in many different ways. We could do that with other types of categories. Right. One of the decisions we've made is actually not to do that, but to try to provide a bigger part of a trip. Right now, when you look at the trip, there are a lot of different parts. We are working on the accommodation side. There are a lot of other things we could do.
I guess maybe next year we'll do a follow-up to that.
And I'll tell you more.
Ladies and gentlemen, Olivier Gremillon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.